Hello again guys, part 2 is here for my Wuwa tier list. Thank you guys a lot for the support in the last video. As I said before, I was going to try my best to include Brand and Phoebe in this time around, but unfortunately, I didn't really get a chance to test out the characters and figure out how their kit works. So if you guys really want to see Brand and Phoebe, let me know in the comments down below and I'll do a separate video for that. As always, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, subscribe. And with that said, let's just jump right in. Alright, next up we have everybody's favorite gunslinger. We got Chixia. I really love this character. I think a lot of people do as well. So we're gonna go and list off some of her pros, then also her cons. So first of all, this is a small one, but I feel like I should include it because it kind of fits with her kit and her playstyle. All of her moves can be cancelled, making them safe. So she has no commitment on any of her moves whatsoever, making almost all of her actions pretty much safe. Her ult is massive in AoE and massive in damage, and it also hits multiple times. She is still viable at low dupes or no dupes at all. She deals incredible amount of damage in a short amount of time. Her counterattacks and her basic attacks are pretty quick. She has different uses for her skills, so if you already played Chixia, you know that if you tap her skill, she does a slide forward, which also gives you a little bit of charge for your forte skill gauge. And if you hold her skill, she goes into a rapid fire mode, I guess you could say, which uses up her skill gauge. And at the end of that said rapid fire mode, you can add on some big damage by hitting the attack button at the right time. Even though she is a 4-star, she does not require a team whatsoever. She powers up via her skill. I believe somewhere in her kit states that every shot that she hits via rapid fire mode increases her attack by I think 1% or so from each shot. And I think that's about it. For her cons, this one might just be me, but I feel like she struggles against pressure, so enemies like Crownless or Tempest Mephis, or anybody that don't stagger from her shots, and bosses that attack relentlessly without any grace period. Obviously, yeah, she has parrying issues. She is a gun user. I don't think there has been, I think there's only one gun user at the moment that can actually parry. And also for her forte gauge skill, so her rapid fire mode, it takes a while to actually get to the end, which is the big damage. And I think that's about it. All in all, regardless of her flaws and the fact that she is a 4-star, I still think Chixia is one of the best DPS in the entire game. Therefore, landing her in a solid S tier for me. Honestly, if you're not using this character, all I can say is that you are missing out. Alright, next up we got big girl. Got very big girl, Taichi. While there is a lot to say that is good about this character, I feel like there's a lot of bad to say about this character, so let's get into it. For her pros, obviously she is hard to kill. She is a tank. If you have dupes as well, she's pretty much unkillable. Her ult does insane amount of damage. She is a self-healer, counter everything in the entire game if your defense is high enough. She is a skill buffer, so universal skill buffer, and obviously she is a tank. She is the team tank. That's about it that I can list for pros. So let's get into the dark and gritty with the cons, because there is a lot. So in my opinion, in the game that is Wuwa, I feel like half her kit is unnecessary, because in a game where there is a dodge mechanic, why would you ever want to get hit? And her entire kit is based on getting hit. So therefore, I list that as a con. Her attack speed and counterattacks are very slow. Her skill is kind of useless. Her playstyle can be hard to determine because nobody in the entire game plays the same way she does. In conclusion, while she may be Taichi the unkillable, that's all she kind of really is. Yeah, I hate to do this, but this is probably the first as well, but she's going into F tier. This character, she kind of sucks, not gonna lie, she kind of sucks, and her kit is just, it's not meant for this game. In a game like maybe say Genshin, where the dodge mechanic is non-existent, sure, but in Wuwa where you can actually dodge and get rewarded for dodging to begin with. Not to mention that most of the time, endgame content wise, bosses have mechanics that will one-shot you regardless of however high your defense is. You can argue and say that, you can argue. I don't really care. I think this character could use a rework, in my opinion. Maybe if you're gonna make her a tank, give her something that doesn't require her to get hit. Even though I do like this character, believe me when I say this, I do like this character. I just kind of hate the way that her kit was designed. So yeah, enough rambling. Taichi is an F tier, and yeah, let's move on. Next up we have Jianxin. I think this character is only cracked in a utility sense. I don't think her damage is high enough for her to be considered cracked in a DPS sense. So let's just list some pros that I think she has real quick. First of all, she has a button for literally everything in the entire game. Her parry pretty much wins against every single enemy attack in the entire game. So just that alone is really cracked in a utility sense, because if you do not know enemy attack patterns or what an enemy is about to do next, simply holding down her skill button ensures that you are safe for at least one hit from that said enemy. Believe it or not, her Forte skill can be used to parry, but the timing and window is kind of weird, so I wouldn't recommend going for it. She provides shields and heals for the current on-field Resonator. She has AoE for the majority of her kit, so basic attack, Forte skill, and her ult are all AoE. She has a multi-hidden counter attack, so it's really good for parrying. She is an ult buffer. She has pretty decent crowd control via her Forte skill and her ult. She has a physical hidden ult, so it can be used to parry. And I think that's about it for pros. Let's just list some cons real quick. She doesn't really have much, but her Forte skill takes a while to actually finish. So to actually get the full shield from her Forte skill, or to actually finish her entire Forte skill gauge, takes a very long time. Her skill could do more, considering that her downtime for everything else in her kit is quite long, and her damage is a bit on the weaker side. So yeah, she doesn't really hit that hard, but I guess you wouldn't be using her for DPS anyway. Yeah, that's about it for Jianxin. I don't think that she is a bad character, but I don't think she is top DPS as well. So for that, I think I'm going to put her in a solid A tier because of the things that she can do. Utility wise, A tier for Jianxin. I think she's fine there for now. Next up we have Xiangli Yao. This character was originally free in the 1.2 patch of Wuthering Waves. So if you are new to Wuthering Waves, unfortunately you have missed a free unit, and a pretty good one at that. And here are my reasons why. To start off with his pros, he has massive AoE via his ult. He has coordinated attacks via his outro skill, so almost like Jiyan, every time he is swapped out, the incoming Resonator gets a buff, to where every time they hit the enemy with a basic attack, a lightning strike will follow up. His ult is an install that hits 3 times after the initial hit before ending. It also changes the way your character attacks and also how your skill behaves, so it pretty much turns your skill into a semi-ult. He has a physical hidden skill, which is also frame 1. When I say frame 1, I mean it comes out almost instantaneously, so no delay whatsoever. He doesn't need a team, he dishes out a fair amount of damage, and he is pretty much safe on most of his actions. His basic attacks and counter attacks are very fast. His Forte skill charges extremely quickly. His ult slows enemies upon activation, so every time he ults, the surrounding enemies gets put into a stasis-like state where their movement are slowed for a certain amount of time. And yeah, that's about it for pros. Let's list some cons real quick. He doesn't really offer much to team play. And lastly, his Forte skill can be unsafe if you commit to it. In conclusion, this one is an obvious no-brainer. I don't want to ramble too much, so I think that Xiangli Yao deserves a solid S tier. Definitely try and get him when he is up on Raid Up next. Up next we have Yinlin, a very solid sub DPS for the Electro element, with a lot of AoE dumped into her kit. So let's talk about why she is good first. For her pros, she has a massive ult and Electro buff, so any Electro character that is on her team gets a massive DPS boost. Her kit centers around coordinated attacks that deal a fair amount of damage. Her ult and skill are both AoE. The second charge or second use of her skill is physical hidden and can be used to parry. Her Forte skill allows her to deal damage when off field, and its AoE is ridiculously huge. And lastly, her basic and counter attacks are pretty fast. Her cons are that she has commitment on some of her moves, specifically speaking her Forte skill. Just like Encore, it locks her in place until the animation is complete. She sorta has parrying issues. The only move I'm aware of that she can use to parry are her plunging attacks, the first hit of her basic attack, and the second charge or second use of her skill. She needs a team, she is a sub DPS, and lastly, her plunging attacks can be unsafe because it locks you in the animation until you've hit the ground. In conclusion, while she may be a DPS, she is still a sub DPS, so for that, I think Yinlin deserves a solid A tier. So just leave her right there. Yeah, solid A tier for a Yinlin. She's obviously not a bad character, but I think that she sort of needs help with how her kit is. Alright, up next we have a very spicy one. We have a very overrated character. We have our beloved Danji, the demon of Wuwa. There's a reason why that image of her and Tempest Memphis exists on the internet. I'll try and find it if I can, but yeah, there's a reason why that image exists. So yeah, let's just list some pros real quick. First of all, she dishes out a insane amount of damage. She has quick basic and counterattacks, multi-hit and counterattack, so it's very good for parrying. She has free use of her skill. The only trade is that she takes damage every time she does this. She has a multi-hidden ult. I believe it's also physical hidden, but the timing can be quite weird, so yeah, I wouldn't recommend going for that. She doesn't really need a team. She is a skill issue character. She has a multi-hidden forte skill, which also has iframes. She is a decent havoc buffer, so if you don't have Russia or Ruxia, whatever her name is, she can be substitute for that. She's still viable at low dupes or no dupes. Her skill is physical hidden. She can charge her forte skill out of combat with a trade-off to her HP. She debuffs the enemy via her skill, which increases their damage dealt to that said enemy. Alright, let's list some cons real quick. It's not too much, it's just the obvious. First one is that you're always close to death's door, one mistake away from death, and she can be difficult / scary to play. So yeah, this one's a joke. This one's actually a joke. I wouldn't know where to put her. I have no idea where to put her, but this one is actually a joke. Danji is actually just a demon. I don't know why they make this character so freaking busted for a 4-star. So I'm thinking in front of Rover. That seems fair, right? Yeah, that seems fair. I think right in front of Rover does it. So yeah, Danji is an obvious S tier, and yeah, let's move on. Up next, we have another joke. This is we got our beloved Camellia. Let's just talk about her real quick. Just get her out of the way. In my opinion, if you have this character, you do not need any other character. This character is just easy mode. That's my first pro. Her basic attack combo parries very easily, like super easily. You don't have to do much, just hold down the attack button once you get into that phase. Basically has 2 ults. Her skill transfers into an ult when I think she uses Concerto energy actually, the energy you use to switch characters. I think she uses that. She doesn't need a team. She is the monster of Wuwa. I would say her damage is just insane. She can basically fly with her skill. If you exit her skill via jump and then cancel into her skill again, you can continuously do this until you're pretty much at max height in the air. She has crowd control via her skill, so if you swap stance, she's a stance character. If you swap stance, she goes into a crowd control state where her range expands tremendously. And of course, she has a physical hidden skill. The timing can be kind of weird, but it does hit physical. Pretty sure I got the gist of it. So let's list some cons real quick. She has commitment on some of her moves. Her forte skill has commitment on it. You cannot cancel it once it is in motion. She can be confusing at first glance. She's a field hog. She doesn't like being off field, especially the fact that her forte skill uses Concerto energy, which pretty much cock blocks your entire team. I don't have to talk about this one. I don't have to talk about this one. I really don't. Yeah. This character is too much. It's too much, man. She's literally just at the top of the food chain. I have nothing else to say. She's too much. If you don't already have her, you need to get her. Like, you honestly need her. Camellia is an obvious S tier. Let's leave it at that and move on. Next up, we have the recent release, Kuroda. She is the only 5-star pistol user in the entire game. For her pros, she has a frame 1 skill, which is also physical hidden, so if you see an enemy about to do a parrying move, simply pressing down her skill pretty much guarantees you a free parry from a distance as well too, so you don't have to actually get close to actually parry an enemy. She has control effects on her skill, so she freezes enemies. She has an area ult. You can use her ult in midair. She has iframes on her forte skill, so whenever you use her forte skill, she is pretty much safe during the animation. She has a physical hidden counterattack, probably the only pistol user in the entire game that can actually parry via counterattack. She can charge her forte gauge out of combat simply by just attacking. Almost no downtime on anything. I would say probably the only downtime she kind of has is her ult. Her skill recovers pretty quickly, and her forte skill charges insanely quickly as well. She has a multi-use skill, so you can use her skill twice in a row before it goes on cooldown. And she has the safest skill in the entire game. I know this one's just a nitpick, but she has the safest skill in the entire game, I think. Can't think of anything off the top of my head that is wrong with this character. Maybe this one's just a small one, but I think her ult is a tad bit too flashy. I don't think there's much in the con section for this character. So yeah, I think this one's a no-brainer as well. I'm not sure where to put her, but I think based off of what she can do, I think I'll put her in front of Jinxi. I think I'll put her in front of Jinxi, yeah. Maybe even, yeah, right? I think she's like right behind Camilla in terms of brokenness. Kuroda is an obvious S tier, I don't need to ramble. And let's move on. Next up we have somebody that is not really represented a lot in the Wuwa community. This character is pretty much a ghost when it comes to actually seeing someone play him. Also, this character, to be honest, I don't quite know a lot about him because I don't plan on ever using him, ever. But to those who have actually built him, let me know if I've missed something or said something incorrect about him. Let's list some pros real quick. Let's get through this guy real quickly. For pros for Alto, he is quite easy to play. His forte skill charges, or his forte gauge charges pretty quickly. You can put distance between the enemy and him at will. He is an arrow buffer, so he buffs the arrow element. Doesn't really need a team, he performs fairly decently on his own. And lastly, he can distract the enemy via his skill. I'm not so sure how viable this is, if it's even like worth doing, but yeah, he can actually distract the enemies or taunt the enemies via his skill. Okay, let's dip into the cons. In my opinion, I think his kit sucks. Too much of his abilities do the same thing. There are better alternatives. We have Jiyan, we have Jianxin, we have Lingyang. I would even say Yang is a better option than this guy. He has parrying issues, he is a gun character. The smoke dash doesn't give you iframes, you're vulnerable even though you're in that state. And lastly, I think he requires some form of investment to really make him worth building. Yeah, this might be a second as well. I think this character sucks. If you already built him and actually main this character, let me know if I'm in the wrong, but I think this might be our second F tier. This character sucks. I think he sucks. And there's too many alternatives that are better than him. Yeah, I think Alto is an F tier. Let's move on. Alright, next up we got my girl, my potential main. I'm actually planning on maining this character. Let's see what we got here for Lumi. So for her pros, she can play range and close range at will. She has an AoE ult that deals a fair amount of damage. The dodge mechanic is integrated into her skill, so whenever you use her skill at the perfect time, she actually goes into a perfect dodge state. She is a skill buffer, so if you don't have Chixia, you can substitute her for that, for Kuroda. Her forte gauge charges pretty quickly. I wouldn't say she's viable at no dupes, but I think she is viable at say at least one dupe. She has fast and multi-hidden basic attacks. And lastly, she has a physical hidden skill. It's hard to gauge the timing on this one, so I would recommend actually going for a parry using her skill. Alright, time for the Lumi cons. Let's see what the Lumi cons are saying. As I said before, she can be kind of confusing considering the fact that she has two modes. She has red light and yellow light, I believe. I believe in red light, her basic attacks are normal. She uses the weapon. And in yellow light mode, she uses the hamster as a projectile. The dodge mechanic is actually sort of changed between each of her stands. She has commitment on her skill, her pounce. After you get in the forte charge for yellow light mode, her pounce has commitment on it. You cannot cancel out of it until the animation is complete. She needs a team. She has a lot. She has so much unsafe stuff in her kit. Specifically her pounce. Her pounce is very unsafe, so yeah, you kind of need a team. She has stamina issues. So her playstyle drains a ton of stamina. If you don't know how to manage this properly, this could be a problem. This game runs on stamina, and you need that resource to do literally almost everything in the entire game. So with all that said, I don't think Lumi is a bad character. Once you learn how to play her, she can be both fun and actually a viable DPS. I think Lumi is actually a decent character once you understand how her kit fully works. Also, yeah, you kind of need dupes. So once you get like enough dupes to actually cover her stamina consumption, I think she actually becomes a better unit. I think she's like pretty much at the bottom. I don't think she's the best in the game, and also her stuff is very unsafe. Stamina consumption is the one big flaw she has. Using up one of the best resource in the entire game, the resource that you actually need to do literally everything in the entire game, specifically dodge and enemy attacks. If you don't know how to have this resource, you are pretty much screwed, and she uses up a lot of it in her playstyle. So yeah, that's the one thing I don't really like about Lumi. Yeah, I think Lumi is a B tier. I think she's fine there. She's not bad, she's not good, but you know, she's not terrible at the same time. So yeah, Lumi is in the beloved B tier. I love this character and I do plan on maining her. So yeah, if you love Lumi, know that she's not the best, but she's still viable, I would say. Alright, up next we have the fire drag. We have the dragon boy, dragon man. Not much special about this character. Let's just go through his stuff really quickly. Obviously, he has coordinated attacks via his ult, he buffs heavy attack damage, and lastly his skill has AoE. For the cons for Morty, he has parrying issues, he is a gun character. Secondly, his ult is an install, and it only hits one enemy at a time. There are way better alternatives in the game. For example, Chixia. And lastly, he needs dupes. Even at high dupes, I don't think he is still that crazy. With all that said, I don't think he's a bad character either. I think he might just be the fact that he is a sub DPS and that, yeah, he's not meant to be anything else. So with all that said, I think Morty he's a solid, I think he's a decent sub DPS. But yeah, as I said before, there are better alternatives, way better alternatives that kind of outclass him. Next up, we have the Twink. I hate this character. So Lingyang, let's start off with his pros. He has fast basic attacks. He has no cooldown on his skill, so his skill is pretty much free use. He has a physical hidden skill, so he can be used to parry. He has multi-hit and counterattacks, so really useful for parrying. His forte skill is an install, which puts him in that weird jumpy mode. I kind of hate it, but at the same time it's kind of cool. His ult is an AoE and also puts him in that install state, which his forte skill also puts him in. And lastly, he doesn't really need a team. He is a fair DPS for the Glacial element. I wouldn't say he's cracked. For the cons, I can say his unique playstyle can be kind of difficult to master, especially the drum jumping is kind of both annoying and confusing at the same time. His dodge changes during his forte skill, so the drum jumping, or whatever that state is called, his dodge animation changes during this time, so it can be kind of hard to actually time perfect dodging in that state. And lastly, you cannot dodge cancel his punch and attacks just like Yinlin. Once you've done it, you have to commit to it until the animation is complete. With all that said, I'm not going to be biased, this character is fairly good, so I think Lingyang deserves a solid A tier. I think it deserves a solid A tier, so yeah, let's just leave it at that. Alright, we're almost done. Next up we have Yuanwu. Let's just list some pros I think he has real quick. His basic attacks are pretty quick. He is a tank buffer, so him and Taichi go hand in hand. He is a vibration melter, so he is pretty much a boss stunner. His ult is an AoE. His skill has AoE and also has coordinated attacks. He has a physical hidden skill. He has multi-hidden counterattacks, so really good for parrying. His forte skill is an install, which puts him into a power-up state. And his ult is also an install, which gives him pretty much the same thing, it's a power-up state. For cons, I think he needs a team. I think he plays like a sub DPS because of his skill. So I think he needs a team. Secondly, there are better alternatives, 4-star or not. I think there's just so many characters in the game that are Electro Element. With all that said, I think he's a decent character as well. Yeah, Yuanwu can get a solid B tier. I don't think he's bad or good. And lastly, we have the beloved Yohu. This character is both weird and cool at the same time, so let's talk about why she is good. First of all, she heals on hit. She pretty much heals the entire team just from hitting the enemy. She has a physical hit and forte skill, so whenever you have 4 items and she goes into that little frenzy state that hits physical, she buffs coordinated attacks, so Jie and Yinlin are even very good. Her forte skill has iframe, so she's pretty much invincible during the animation. She can charge her forte skill out of combat. She gains a forte charge from counterattacks, heavy attacks, and her skill. And lastly, even though she is a healer / support, I don't think she needs a team. She is pretty viable on her own, and her dupes make her pretty much almost unkillable. For her cons, she has a lot going on in her kit. There's a lot to keep track of when actually playing her. Second is that her playstyle can be somewhat annoying and also difficult. And lastly, the character can be hard to master if you do plan on using her as a DPS. So with all that said, I think Yohu is actually a pretty decent character. Once you get to actually playing her, I don't think she's that bad, even for a 4-star. There's a lot of stuff in her kit that you actually want, and she is the only coordinated attack buffer, so she's actually really good. She's a really good support / I would even say DPS. You can actually build a DPS as well, so she can actually go up 1 tier from the normies. I think she's actually up like right here. Yeah, Yohu is a solid A tier for me. I was gonna do these guys, but there's just not a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time, and also I have to research these guys and also figure out what their kits do and all that stuff because they're new. So there's a lot of stuff that have to go into these videos, and I would try to boast it right now, but I don't really want to do that. So yeah, if you guys want to see a video with Phoebe and Brent, let me know. So other than that, this was my tier list for Wuwa. I think I did a fairly good job. If you guys disagree with any of these, let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, with all that said, peace, have a good one, and much love.